I wish so much of crime didn't take place after dark. It's most unnerving.
Hello to all the classic people that are returning. I'm glad you're back. I want to welcome any new visitors. As a technical note, references and citations are listed for each show on the site at classicmovierev.com. Today, on the Classic Movie Reviews podcast, we are taking on film noir The File on Thelma Jordon, 1949. This movie drags a bit in the beginning. It has a great cast and they did a beautiful job delivering their lines. But the point, man, the point. This film is rated 6.9 on imdb.com, and I could see it being lower than that. On RottenTomatoes.com, the film had a 73% audience approval. I can see that. If you make your way through the entire movie, it will be worth your time. New York Times film critic Bosley Crothers said on January 19, 1950, quote, "The perplexing aspect of sacred and profane love, which have troubled both the loved and the unloved, as well as the scenarists, are tough hurdles apparently. For in Thelma Jordon, which came to the Paramount yesterday, these amours, which involve a basically fine family man and the designing dame he can't resist, seem to have stumped the experts who made the picture. Thelma Jordon is, for all of its production polish, adult dialogue, and intelligent acting, a strangely halting and sometimes confusing work. And though it is concerned with emotions, great emotional impact is not one of its shining attributes. Under Robert Siodmak's direction, the pace of this romantic melodrama is generally slow and generates some speed towards a climax which is not too startling." Unquote. He concludes with, quote, "They all help create a few moods and some suspense, but Thelma Jordon takes an awful long time to point out that the wages of sin are pretty high." Unquote. The last part sums this movie up pretty well. You just have to wait a long time for the payoff. Even the directing of Siodmak could not make this a top-flight film noir. Noroftheweek.com had a higher opinion of the recently re-released film saying, quote, "Director Robert Siodmak completed his amazing run of American noir classics with the underrated and currently grossly ignored gem. The File on Thelma Jordon isn't a classic on the level of The Killers or Crisscross, but it's way too close to be gathering dust in Paramount's vault, largely unviewed, having never been released on VHS or DVD." Unquote. Variety went right down the middle with their 1949 review saying, quote, "Scripting, from a story by Marty Holland, is very forthright up to the contrived conclusion, and even that is carried off successfully because of the sympathetic development of the misguided and misused character played by Wendell Corey." Unquote. Actors.
Right, and I'm a Shakespearean actor.
Barbara Stanwyck plays the title character, Thelma Jordon. This great actress was first covered in the tremendous Norrish Western The Violent Men, 1955. Wendell Corey played the role of Assistant District Attorney and tortured family man Cleve Marshall. Corey was first covered in the Christmas film Holiday Affair, 1949, and in that film he had love trouble as well. Basil Ruesdale as Judge Jonathan David Hancock gives an air of solemnity to the court proceedings. Kenneth Tobey pops up for a moment as the uncredited police photographer during the murder investigation. Paul Kelly played Miles Scott. Kelly was born in 1899 in New York City.
I'm walking here! I'm walking here!
Kelly grew up in Brooklyn, near their family bar. The bar was near Vitagraph Studios, who occasionally borrowed furniture from the bar. Kelly's mother saw to it that in exchange, her son would get background work in one-reel silent films. Kelly first worked on Broadway at age 11. Beginning in 1911, Kelly started getting regular work as a tough kid in the films. He also began appearing regularly on Broadway. Later, Kelly became romantically involved with a woman, Dorothy Mackay, that was being abused by her husband. The husband was also a friend of Kelly. In 1927, Kelly had a brawl with the husband, Ray Raymond, which resulted in Raymond dying from a brain hemorrhage. Convicted of manslaughter, Kelly was sentenced to 1 to 10. He spent 25 months in San Quentin before he was paroled. After his release, Kelly married Dorothy Mackay and stayed with her until she died in an accident in 1940. Kelly resumed regular work on Broadway. Even his film career was revived, albeit he was now in supporting roles. Kelly continued to work in films until his death. His films include The Flying Irishman, 1939, The Roaring Twenties, 1939, Invisible Stripes, 1939, Queen of the Mob, 1940, The Howards of Virginia, 1940, Wyoming, 1940, Flight Command, 1940, Mystery Ship, 1941, Mr. and Mrs. North, 1942, Tarzan's New York Adventure, 1942. You should check out Johnny Weissmuller diving off the Brooklyn Bridge. Flying Tigers, 1942. The Story of Dr. Wassel, 1944. San Antonio, 1945. The Cat Creeps, 1946. Deadline for Murder, 1946. Crossfire, 1947. Springfield Rifles, 1952. The Steel Cage, 1954. The High and the Mighty, 1954. And The Square Jungle, 1955. He died in 1956. Joan Tetzel played Pamela Blackwell Marshall, a long-suffering wife of ADA Cleve Marshall. She was only in the film for a bit, but served her role well. Thelma was born in New York City in 1921.
I'm walking here! I'm walking here!
A successful star on Broadway and the London stage, Thelma only made 6 movies. These films include Duel in the Sun, 1946, The Paradigm Case, 1947, The File on Thelma Jordon, 1949, and Hell Below Zero, 1954. She was married for a long time to actor Oscar Homolka, who we mentioned in The Long Ships, 1964. Thelma died in 1977. Story.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
Assistant District Attorney Cleve Marshall, Wendell Corey, returns to his office one night. His friend and co-worker, Chief Investigator Miles Scott, Paul Kelly, is on the phone with Cleve's wife, giving Cleve cover by saying he's probably working on a case somewhere. Cleve continues to drink as Miles listens to Pamela Blackwell Marshall, Joan Thelma, complain that Cleve is a no-show for their anniversary dinner with her wealthy parents. Finally, Pamela hangs up as her father says Cleve's behavior is unacceptable. Miles tries to talk sense to Cleve as Cleve continues to drink. Earlier in the day, Cleve attempted to buy a present for his wife for their anniversary. When he got there, the piece had already been purchased by his father-in-law. Miles leaves to meet a train, but Cleve stays in the office to drink. A little later, Thelma Jordon, Barbara Stanwyck, comes in looking for Miles. Cleve is really rude to Thelma, being in his drunken state. Thelma explains that her Aunt Vera Edwards, Gertrude Hoffman, has a problem with burglars, but uniforms upset her.
I wish so much of crime didn't take place after dark. It's most unnerving. It's about my Aunt Miss Vera Edwards. I imagine you know her. Most everyone does. She's a character around here.
Cleve finally tells that he is not Miles. Then he makes a bad pass at Thelma. Cleve finally regrets being so rude and comments on Thelma's legs.
I used to know your aunt. She caught me stealing oranges in her orange grove once. Did you ever get switched with an orange branch? I still got the scars. Ruined my legs permanently. I noticed that you have not had the same experience.
I've only been here a few months. I've passed the orange stealing age, and I haven't yet reached the flattery one.
He follows her out to her car. She has a ticket and is mad. He introduces himself to her. She perks up when he says he is an ADA. He finally badgers her into going out to get a drink with him. He gets into the back seat on her side and climbs into the front passenger seat. Cleve passes out in the bar after he continues drinking. Cleve and Thelma dance. He's pretty handsy and mauls her a bit. They leave and he drunkenly kisses her in the car. She takes it well, and they kiss a little more before she leaves. He drives home in a drunken stupor. Pamela is waiting for Cleve to arrive. She asks him where he's been, and he passes out. The next day, Thelma is waiting outside of Cleve's office. She has met with Scott, and he is sending out a plainclothes agent. Cleve apologizes for getting a little out of hand.
I guess you've forgotten a lot about last night. Well, you don't like me in the daytime.
I didn't say that.
My crystal ball was right. You are married.
Way bad.
No. Only I'm embarrassing you. This is a small town, I understand.
I guess I got a little out of hand last night. I apologize.
Accepted.
She accepts and leaves. When Cleve goes home, Pamela is packing and he thinks she is leaving him. Actually, she is leaving early for the summer vacation at the beach and she is taking the kids. Cleve asks her not to go to the beach this year. She says she is going and he will drive down every weekend. Cleve's secretary says she is going out with some reporters. She gives him a message with a number to call before she leaves. Thelma is with her Aunt Vera when the call comes in from Cleve, but he has identified himself as Detective Thompson. Thelma is thrilled that Cleve returned her call. She agrees to meet him by the road. Cleve picks her up and they head to a nice restaurant. Thelma tells about her background working in hotel hospitality.
I got a job at the hotel as a hostess. Oh, strictly the genteel kind.
Doing what?
Tennis, bingo games, bridge. I make a great extra partner. Fill in at anything if I'm needed.
If a drink makes you feel like this, you better leave it alone.
No. You asked about my past. You should get to know her. The pleasant, refined Miss Jordan. Seen everywhere during the season. Lake Placid, Virginia Beach, Saratoga.
Everything is going fine until Cleve's secretary and a reporter come in. Cleve and Thelma duck out the back. Cleve drops Thelma back at the road where he picked her up. They decide to meet again. As they kiss, a man is watching from inside the garden. When Thelma goes inside, the watcher, Tony Laredo, Richard Robert, hugs and kisses her. She goes to quiet the dog and tells Tony to wait. Another evening, Cleve picks Thelma up at the road. They go to a lover's lane and learn more about each other. Cleve tells her he loves her.
Why is it you first meet a woman and she's only pretty? After a few weeks, she's beautiful.
Sometimes it's the other way around.
Not with you. Well, now you know the whole story.
You feel as though she let you down, but you let her down. You should have told her.
You can't just say to your wife, don't leave me alone. I'm falling in love with another woman.
If it's true, you should have said it.
When another car comes in, Thelma puts on her sequin scarf and they leave. But not before a big old smooch. She blurts out that she is also married to a man named Tony. The other car pulls up and the man inside writes down some details about Cleve and Thelma. They go to another lover's lane, and Thelma continues her story about marrying Tony to get into show business, but he only used her for her money. A car comes to their new location while Cleve and Thelma declare their love for each other. They make plans to go away the next Friday night. Thelma leaves a note for her Aunt Vera that she has to go away for the weekend. A shutter banging wakes Aunt Vera, and she feebly gets up. Downstairs, she grabs a .32 revolver and heads to investigate the sound. As soon as Aunt Vera enters the room, a shot is fired. Just then, the phone starts ringing. The butler answers in his room, and it is Cleve calling. Cleve thinks Thelma has arrived when he hears a horn blow and hangs up. It's not Thelma, so Cleve calls back. This time, Thelma answers the phone. Thelma is in a panic and demands that Cleve come to the road and use the side gate immediately. He gets there, and he says, Tony has shown up, and she says, no, but I thought of him first as well. Finally, Thelma tells that Aunt Vera has been shot.
Oh, it's Aunt Vera. I was all right till you came. I don't know what's the matter with me.
You're all right now. Come on, talk. What is it?
She's dead.
What?
Shot. I was just leaving to get the car out. I heard it. She's on the library floor there.
And an emerald necklace is missing. Thelma says she had written a letter to Tony about the necklace and is worried about being implicated. Cleve tells her to go inside and scream and then tell the butler. Thelma confesses that she wiped all the fingerprints away in case they were Tony's. Thelma and Cleve go back to the house and start putting the murder scene back the way it was. Thelma must take care of the note, her coat, and the suitcase. Cleve brings up the will and how it would look if Thelma were the heir. The dog is conveniently at the vet. The phone rings again and the butler picks it up. Thelma listens on the other end and the doctor wants to contact Aunt Vera. The butler starts towards the house and Cleve has to exit through the window the burglar came in, and he leaves footprints in the mud. Cleve goes to the beach to see his family. He is called and asked to return by Miles. Miles tells of the murder of Aunt Vera and requests that he go to Vera and Thelma's house to investigate. Pamela gives Cleve the business for going to work. Pamela's parents arrive and she confesses to Cleve that her father thinks he is fooling around. He admits that there's someone else. He then tells her that he still loves her and doesn't want a divorce. Cleve makes it to the murder scene and they are recording his footprints in the garden. Miles is interrogating Thelma. Aunt Vera has made a new will and left Thelma all her money.
And so she changed her will.
That's what you keep telling me, but I had no knowledge of that.
Do you know to whom the money was bequeathed in the original will?
I didn't even know there was a will.
To the county, Miss Jordan. There was to be a park in her honor.
I'm sorry about that. It's not my fault.
Well, don't be too sorry. There may still be that park.
Mr. Scott, in your dealings with me, you're questioning your suspicions. Don't be sarcastic. I'm not a criminal. Don't treat me so.
Kenneth Tobey shows up as a police photographer. Miles sends Cleve to talk to Thelma in private. Cleve tells Thelma that Tony called that morning from Chicago, giving himself an alibi. Cleve also tells that Tony and Thelma were never married. Cleve says he will hire a fancy attorney from San Francisco for Thelma. Miles has talked to Tony, and Tony says he can't help Thelma because he doesn't have any money. Miles brings in the butler and he tells about the mystery man, who they call Mr. X. The butler overheard Thelma saying something had happened and asking Cleve, the unknown Mr. X, to come immediately. Miles arrests Thelma. District Attorney Melvin Pierce, Barry Kelly, gets an indictment, and they have recovered the jewels. Thelma's lawyer, Kingsley Willis, Danley Ridges, arrives. I think he's an evil Perry Mason. Cleve has secretly recommended to Willis, whom he paid $5,000, to hire Pierce's brother to force him off the case. Cleve is given the job of prosecuting Thelma. Willis meets with Thelma, and he doesn't care if she's guilty or not. Cleve meets with his wife. She has found out that he withdrew $5,000 from their account. Pamela tells that her father has had a detective following him. She says the detective saw the woman's sequin scarf in the distance one night. Miles comes in and he knows about the affair as well. When the trial begins, Cleve antagonizes the jury right away.
Do you believe in capital punishment? You particular 12 said that you did. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here.
Let's get her convicted first, then worry about the penalty.
Maybe you said to yourself, she isn't guilty, and I won't have to recommend death. But you will, Mrs. Asher, and all the rest of you, because I'm going to prove to you that Thelma Jordon is guilty.
Watch, Mrs. Asher.
And you'll have no qualms, religious, humane, or otherwise.
And does everything wrong that he can.
Oh, Your Honor, I object. That's incompetent, irrelevant, and immaterial. It's also improper cross-examination.
As the case goes on, the jury has reasonable doubt because there is no information on Mr. X. Cleve gets new information on Thelma from Miles. He meets with Thelma and shows the evidence of her being caught in a gambling raid in Florida. She has bleach blonde hair and so must be guilty. Thelma and Tony have left a streak of robberies and blackmail.
Your shiny life with Mr. Laredo. Odd that wherever it's shown, there's whiffs of blackmail, minor thefts, borrowed quarrels.
You can't hold that against me.
The jury will.
Cleve says he is going to call her lawyer, Willis. That day in court, Willis refuses to call Thelma to testify, so Cleve cannot get the new evidence into the case. Willis introduces a transcript where Cleve said the time of the murder and says Mr. X may have committed the murder. Tony is in the courtroom. The jury finds Thelma not guilty. Pamela tries to talk to Cleve. Thelma is released and goes back to Aunt Vera's former house, which she now inherited. Tony is there when Cleve calls. She gives Cleve the brush off. Tony says Scott was supposed to be the mark. Thelma says she doesn't love Cleve, but he is in love with her. Tony was the mastermind behind the murder, and it was just for the jewels. The inheritance will be a bonus. Cleve shows up at the house and leans on the doorbell. Thelma takes Cleve into the murder room and says she is going away with the man she loves, Tony.
In this room where I've told you so many lies.
What is it? What's happened?
He's come after me. I'm going away with him.
I don't believe that.
You don't believe anything you don't see.
I don't want to talk about the trial. That's over. Why is Tony here?
He's part of it. He's all of it. I've always loved him.
Thelma confesses to the killing. Tony comes in and listens to the tale. Cleve and Tony get into a scrap, and Tony clunks Cleve on the head with a pistol butt. Cleve wakes hours later and Tony and Thelma are gone. Tony is driving the car when Thelma asks for a cigarette. She uses the dashboard lighter to light the smoke. I don't know if you're familiar with these, but they contain the fires of hell. She smashes the hot lighter to Tony's head. The car sails over a cliff and explodes in a fiery ball. Thelma is thrown clear, but is gonna die. Thelma confesses everything to Miles.
What about this Tony?
How many confessions do you want?
It was no accident.
No accident, Mr. Scott. Now you've got 2 confessions.
Cleve comes in and Miles tells him that she has not confessed who Mr. X is. Thelma says she loves Mr. X. She finds peace and dies a well-lit, perfectly made-up death. Cleve talks to Miles, who says he knows that Cleve is Mr. X because of the sequin scarf and that he threw the case for Thelma. Miles tells him he will be disbarred and he will be reported to the district attorney.
I guess you know what it means. Disbarment. No more law practice anyway. I'm sorry, I'll have to report it.
I already have. I was with the DA when they found me.
I've always liked you, Cleve.
Cleve says he's already confessed to the DA. Miles has called Pamela, and she and Cleve will talk later. Cleve walks away with nothing. I'll be right back with conclusions and the world-famous short summary following a word from our sponsors. Summary. It is almost universally accepted that Barbara Stanwyck was the best femme fatale ever with her role in Double Indemnity 1944 as Phyllis Dietrichson. Her role in this movie has been described as, quote, a more complex version of her Phyllis Dietrichson in Double Indemnity 1944, unquote. Stanwyck's other film noir roles include The Strange Love of Martha Ivers 1946, The Two Mrs. Carrolls 1947, Cry Wolf 1947, Sorry Wrong Number 1948, No Man of Her Own 1950, The Furies 1950, Clash by Night 1952, The Violent Men 1955, Crime of Passion 1957, and a pre-noir, pre-code, Babyface 1933. In my opinion, this makes Stanwyck queen of film noir, with all of her other roles in this genre paling in comparison to her performance in Double Indemnity 1944. I believe Double Indemnity 1944 received a nod in this film when she was shown in her arrest picture with bleached blonde hair. World famous short summary, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. I hope you enjoyed today's show. You can find connections to social media and email on the site at classicmovierev.com or in the podcast show notes. If you enjoy the show, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. If you've already subscribed, you can tell a friend, colleague, or family member about the show or leave a review at Apple Podcasts. It really helps the show get found. If you want to comment, suggest a movie, or help out, contact me by email at jec@classicmovierev.com. Beware the Moors.